All right, well, welcome to our afternoon session. This is a 110 session called Involving Community Partners to Develop an Effective STEM Action and Sustainability Plan. My name's Karen Harper. I am the STEM and Science Consulting Teacher from the Clarksville Montgomery County School System, and I am partnering today with Dr. Meisch, and she is the Dean of the College of STEM at Austin Peay State University. So we've been working very heavily together for the last 3 years, especially working with schools that are seeking STEM designation. And we're really proud of the way we've worked together to help schools develop their STEM action and sustainability plan, but also, most importantly, how to involve community partners in that embedded and deep relationship we're looking for. Not just Skyping with a scientist or how they can donate funding towards a project at your building, but really that long and lasting community partnership. And we'll be able to share examples of this today, and we're going to ask you to kind of put on your thinking cap and work through some examples as well. Okay, so this bit.ly that we have listed and that has been put in the chat box is an actual link to a Google folder which will have all of your resources for today. We wanted to make sure and leave you with everything you needed to do to take this process and replicate it in your buildings or in your district. And so you'll notice in the Google folder, the first is the slide deck that we're using today, and then each document in there is numbered in order, and then there's an overview sheet that shows you what those pieces and parts are. And we're also going to be showing how we use a lot of the TSIN documents for this process. Okay, so the first step when we talk with schools that are interested in the STEM designation process is I work with just the administration on the TSIN readiness assessment. So some of you may have seen this. This is on the TSIN website. It is an awesome tool to really start having that deep conversation with your building administration as to whether this is something you want to pursue. And so here is what that document looks like. It asks you a series of questions, and then at the very end it has a scoring piece that allows you to determine your readiness. And so what I like to do is I like to just use this with the building and have those honest conversations with the administration first. And a lot of times what's come out of that is, oh, we want to go for STEM designation this year. And then as we see through this tool what's involved, then sometimes we make that actually a 2-year or even a 3-year goal because we're in it to sustain, right? Not just to achieve a designation, we want it to last. And so this is the first step that I use with schools when they share that they're interested. Then we go and do something we've kind of created in Clarksville where we actually assess the school culture and climate with every member in it, classified, certified, administration. And so the way we do it is we take this TSIN STEM designation rubric that's used, and we use that to evaluate everyone in the building. So in your folder, you actually have a packet of this printed. This is not the complete document. This is the parts that we use for this process. And if any of you have seen this rubric, would you raise your hand and just kind of wave? You've seen it, you know what it is? Okay, good. That helps us kind of know where we are here. So it's broken into 5 attributes. The first is infrastructure, how your school schedules are, how your STEM leadership team is. The second is curriculum and instruction. The third is professional development. The fourth attribute is achievement. And the fifth attribute is community and post-secondary partnerships. And then you have a scale. You can go from early to model. And so what we recommend is every member in the building read through every attribute and have conversation with their team or with their think partner, and they really think about where do I perceive our building is at this level of implementation. And we take a pencil and we literally have paper copies and we have them circle. Okay? And so we're actually going to practice this with you, and I want you to take your packet, or if you have one you're sharing, you can work with a partner, but I want you to think about your school, and we're only going to do the first section, infrastructure. So anything that's a 1.1 or a 1.2, I think they're on the back as well. I want you to take about 6 or 7 minutes to think about your school, where you feel like you are, and I want you to circle. And there's a reason we're doing this, because it leads into the presentation. But let's take a few minutes and just think about our building. You can have a thought partner, you can do it on your own, and just score your building based on the first attribute. Okay, any questions? All right, let's give you a few minutes to think about that. Get familiar with that tool. That's the only one, okay. We just don't. So I want to address that question real quick. We are using STEM and STEAM interchangeably. We know that the TSIN designation is STEM and STEAM. We're predominantly STEM when we work together up in Clarksville and with Austin Peay, but everything we're doing is interchangeable to whether you are going for STEM or STEAM action plans. If you're feeling like you've had some conversation over a few of those, you're ready to move on, give me a sideways thumb if you need just a few more minutes. Okay, all right. So as you know, and you've read when you were talking through an attributes, did I do that? Okay, like let's say 1.2 leadership. Okay, if you start here with early and you move on, where do we all want to be? Right? You want to be in the model. Okay, so what we did was once our staffs had taken this pencil and paper idea and they thought through, we then had them enter it into a Google form. I'm a big Google form fan. And so this is also available in the resource folder, and you can make a copy of it and not have to even recreate your own Google form. But we had them select their position in the building. We felt like that was very important if we wanted to maybe evaluate patterns. And then it went and it said 1.1. And it said early developing accomplishing model. And they had to click. And they selected how they, perceive their school at that very moment. And so what this does is it allows us then to examine each attribute, because when you write your action plan, you're obviously going to build actionable steps towards places where you want to seek improvement. And so when you go to analyze the data, which is step 3, and usually I pull back from the schools and I kind of do this process on my own, and then I go back and meet with just the admin teams and we talk about what that data looked like. You know when you export data from a spreadsheet, from a Google form, you get these pie graphs, right? So what this really gives you is the popular choice. Okay, so it's hard to actually see what's happening in that attribute. And so I actually don't prefer to use this to evaluate. I actually prefer to export it into a spreadsheet. And then what I do is I take next to the choice, early developing, model, et cetera, and I add a column to the right, and I assign it the point value. So early is a 1, and this is how TSIN will use it when they evaluate. Early is a 1, developing is a 2, accomplishing 3, model 4. And then when I assign it the point value, I run the spreadsheet to average, and I get my average, and this is 2.35. And the reason I like this more precise information is if each spring we revisit this, we can see if we can measure growth at an area of what the staff is perceiving the building to be with their STEM culture and climate. And then you can choose, if you really have to know where you are, early developing, I round. So this was a 2.35 average, so I rounded down to developing. But what I really do like is that very specific number to the hundredths can help you see what is your absolute strongest strength your school perceives in this rubric, and where is, those levels for improvement. The one thing I want to tell you is when we printed this document, TSIN, their document is beautiful online. It's color-coded. And there's also a section at the bottom that gives you examples of what evidence might look like in each of these attributes. And just, you have to remember, the first time a teacher sees this type of rubric, it can be overwhelming. So for the sake of this self-assessment piece, I actually take that off, because I don't want them hung up on the evidence. I just really want them thinking about their school. So that's a choice you all can make. You can either leave those examples of evidence on your PDF copy, or I took them off and just tried to kind of simplify them, really wanted them to do what you did, which was to move over to what's in the model and think about their school. So this is then how we analyze that data. So I do this and I share this out with admin, and we take a look and we look for trends, and then we get ready to go back and present it to that whole group again. Except this time we invite our community partners. And think about when you're looking at your data, some of you might be doing this with schools that were already designated, but they've had a turnover in admin, or maybe they didn't keep up with their action plan for a year and you're having to start over. And so don't forget to take into account any feedback from TSIN as well. So then we have to make those goals with those actionable steps. So we get back to the faculty, and this time we invite all of those community partners that we know we have access to. And for us, Dr. Meisch at the College of STEM is a great partner. So at a particular school where we're going to share some examples, we brought her in and the associate dean in, and then a few other partners from some businesses around town. Our education foundation president likes to attend and support, and they really can help us think outside of the box, outside of what's in our school building and what we have access to. And when we get them together, let's pretend this whole room is our faculty meeting. We group them into 5 groups, because there's how many attributes? 5, right? And so that group 1 might be working on just infrastructure, and that group 2 might be working on just curriculum and instruction, and they're going to hyper-focus on just that attribute. And we try to build that team vertically. We try to have a teacher from kindergarten, a teacher from first, a kindergarten from related arts, and admin. So make that organic group, if you will, representative, and also a community member. Because it's very easy to put all of your community partners in group 5, because that attribute is community and post-secondary relationships. But really, some of the greatest work that our team has done was through the PD attribute for professional development, and through curriculum and instruction, where we have to make career connections. And so make sure your community members are really spread out. So these are just some notes about how we set that meeting up. And then I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Meisch, and she's going to give you some examples of how we wrote those actionable steps.
Thank you, Karen. So I just wanted to point out, too, from a community partnership, we're kind of really not in the education system. We don't necessarily understand standards as well as you all do, obviously. And so being part of a team that's part of all the teachers and everybody that's in this all the time, it was really helpful for us to get a better understanding of what your needs are and how we can work together to better address them. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different examples. And so as Karen mentioned, I served in the attribute where we looked at basically the community partnership. And so part of what was evident when we had this meeting with the teachers was that there really wasn't much connection for the students in terms of what we could do for career development. And so, of course, this was in the middle of COVID, right? And so we all were very versed in Zoom at this point. And so it made it very easy for us to develop a plan to do this Zoom into STEM careers. And so, anybody can do that. But again, through Karen's idea of building the team that really focused on how to best really focus this, it allowed us to hear from the teachers and from the administrators of understanding, okay, well, what would really be helpful for these 8th graders is that they're getting ready to potentially choose academies. And these academies are all kind of associated with different potential STEM careers. And could we potentially organize it so that it makes sense for the students to kind of be outlaid in this area? And so here next is just kind of an agenda of what that looked like. And so it was really, once I understood, right, what would be most beneficial for the students, we organized our Zoom from 8 to 10 in the morning. We had different faculty come in. We organized it towards the different academies that students would be looking at. So we had health and medicine careers, environmental, cultural teaching careers, technology careers, mathematics, physics, engineering careers, and it was wonderful. We had faculty actually presenting all these different potential career options. They got really creative. We had fossils, we had all kinds of different things, bats, different things that were presented to the students. It was a really robust question and answer session too from the students. And so I think it was really helpful. And of course, one of the main things I'd like to remind everybody too is, we're very lucky that CMCSS, Austin Peay, we're in each other's backyards. However, thanks to COVID, right, one of the few benefits, we all know how to utilize Zoom. You don't have to have a partner in your backyard to be able to do some of these things. You just have to be able to develop that relationship with a partner. And it can be obviously four-year university, it could be a community college, it could be a tech college. There's lots of different opportunities to do something like this, whereas before we didn't necessarily have the capacity. Another great idea is, you can host thousands of people on a Zoom, right? So you could do this across multiple school systems sometimes, right? If you're going to go ahead and schedule one different Zoom session, you can hit multiple areas at one time. So it doesn't have to be that face-to-face component if that makes it easier, because I know obviously getting students to a place or sometimes getting people to come can be tricky. Another idea, as Karen mentioned, as we had the Associate Dean, Dr. Dunkel, in another group on attributes for professional development. And again, hearing what the teams needed, hearing where they needed opportunities for growth and for opportunities, we developed this personalized externship plan where teachers were going to come to us over the summer, be partnered with faculty that were experts in their discipline, basically shadow them for several days, work on research together, develop opportunities for experiments to do with their students. Of course, it was in the middle of COVID, so we didn't have an opportunity to do those externships, but we did follow up this fall, early this spring, with Karen brought several of the lead teachers from different areas. So we organized, and again, through their expertise, understood which standards they needed to be addressed, right? And so we organized different faculty coming in based on what they needed to potentially have more content, more experimental ideas, what they could do. And so basically we did a 6th grade, 7th grade, and then 8th grade leads. They came in for the 6th graders. Every group, I would lead them through a tour of our science center, Sunquist Center. And so part of that was to help them understand what resources they have, right? So we have lots of different, of course, museums. Many students or many of the teachers may have never been there or maybe hadn't been there in a while to understand what they have access to and what we want to, as partners, reach out and supply them with. And so, of course, we had different faculty presenting on different topics. 7th grade, Again, different topics were presented, and I think it was, again, a great opportunity for the teachers to ask questions, right, of course, experts in this discipline to understand, and not only did they have, of course, Q&A, but we gave them everything that we presented, right, so PowerPoints, any experimental ideas, all of that was something that all the teachers had access to. And then again, the 8th grade. So this was something that, again, came out of the session that Karen developed with, of course, discussion for the attributes.
Thank you. Okay, so you have an example of a template in your folder that is where we start with our STEM action plan. It's built in Excel. I have the template in your resource, in the folder in the drive for your resources. And so this is then what we give to each group. We give only the infrastructure piece of paper to the group 1 that's working on infrastructure. And we ask them to sit and brainstorm what are some action steps that we can take to improve where we are. Now, if you'll look up here where it says 1.2 leadership team early developing on target accomplished, I'll actually put the rating from the self-assessment in there so they know where they were. Because if that's really high, like model, they probably don't need to maybe add an action unless there's something already in there they had set their heart on trying to work on or achieve the next year. And so I do add that in so they're not toggling between data and this action plan. So I add that in where the red is, where it says results. And then we come up with at least 1 or 2 actions and who those stakeholders are involved, and then that timeline. And sometimes on that timeline, it won't have the next school year. It'll have the following school year because maybe there's something that has to be done before we get to that point. What's absolutely beautiful about this action plan when you finish it is if you have administration that changes out or you lose some teachers on your leadership team, with this document, you hand it off and everything keeps rolling. And that's the beautiful thing about a STEM action plan and having that in place. Also, if you get to the end of the year and you can't check the box that you achieved something that you had set a goal for whatever reasons, right? You roll it into the next year's timeline. But it's a process. It's things built in place. You can revisit them, okay? So what we want you to do is take your template, and we want you to pick any attribute in infrastructure. 1.1, you're not going to pick because that's the STEM action plan, and that's what we're working on today. But 1.2 or 1.3 or 1.4, and I want you to talk to the people next to you, and I want you to see if you can come up with an idea or an action, and then who would be involved and what would that timeline look like. So just give it a whirl. Talk to your neighbor. We're going to ask a few of you that are comfortable to share out. We're going to give you just a few minutes to play with this template. about 1 more minute to come up with that actionable step, and then be thinking if you're willing to share. I know that's vulnerable, but we would love to hear maybe a few examples of an action you could take to make to grow in a particular area. So about 1 more minute. Is willing to share an example of an action step to make an improvement or show growth? Wah, wah. Okay, I heard something. Here we go.
So in particular for 1.5 school schedules, we discussed being intentional in the common planning time, either for department chairs or grade level leads, and building PLCs within the common planning times to allow for more cross-curricular planning and implementation.
Thank you. So we noticed with our middle school that we worked with, common planning is hard to come by. And you have to be really strategic as with the middle school as to when those folks can come together. And there's a lot of give and take, giving up some faculty meeting time, you know. And so what I love about that action step is it was very specific about what the actions were going to be. Not just we need help with our school schedules, but very specific as to what those actions were going to be. And then who's responsible? Because whoever those stakeholders are, there's a summary sheet I'm going to show next, and that's where you recapture everything so people know how to execute, right? If the expectations are there, people will meet them. If they're not there, people are unsure. They struggle to do what, you know, the plan was, right? And so thank you very much. Is there anyone else that has one they want to share? An idea?
I don't want to talk for you, so you're welcome to chime in. But so he was sharing what they do, and it's a model for the Upper Cumberland area that's currently being, you know, worked and getting into the schools. But I'm on the east side of Tennessee, so in thinking about how to possibly utilize those around us, you know, Lee University, Cleveland State, some of those areas or colleges, maybe in a very similar way, and engaging others in that way. So very, very good thoughts, and sounds like he might be a good resource for that 1.2 there.
Okay. Thank you. And I just want to reiterate what Dr. Meisch said. Sitting in the actual rooms with those groups and hearing the standards we teach and things we were struggling with is really what got their wheels turning and the ideas. They didn't walk in with ideas. They came out of those collaborations. And so great job connecting and and coming up with those ideas. Thank you for sharing. So when you're done, you got to sum it up, right? So that that everyone knows their part and those expectations. And so this is the last step I recommend is on the front of this template, we built just a very simple overview, a summary. And so it's the first tab in the spreadsheet, and it just simply summarizes the attributes we're focusing on and the action steps. This has in every group, like infrastructure, it had all the attributes, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5, right? You might choose to not necessarily set goals or have those in your templates if you're not going to focus on in the following year. So remember, baby steps, right? And so, but we do sum up our attributes and those action steps and put that on the cover sheet. And then one other thing I would suggest is take this template and create a document like this. You have your logo, and then you enter each of the numbers for your evidence, title them, and give a summary. If this is the first document in your folder, and then you have the survey, the self-assessment survey, how you analyze the data, you have the action steps, you have now built your evidence for 1.1 for the STEM designation application. So then once you go to STEM designation, you take this overview and all your documents that you've accounted for in the process, and you move it over to your evidence that you're submitting for 1.1 in the STEM application. It's done. So it's built and it's ready and it's there for you. So everything we've hit today is in this resource folder. I'll go back to the bit.ly in just a second. We've been adding the bit.ly throughout the conference session in the chat for the folks online. But all of these are templates. They're ready to use. The PowerPoint will walk you through. And then that overview sheet you just saw explains what's happening in each document. So I think we have some questions online and maybe some questions in the audience. And then if you want to take out your phone or your computer, we're going to go back to the bit.ly real quick. Don't think it's going to let me go forward, so bear with me. I'm not trying to make you dizzy. This is the link right here. It's bit.ly/STEM Action 2022. And if you want to go in there, that's the resource folder with some of these steps. So do we have any questions in the room first, and then we'll see if there's any questions with our online viewers. All right, Chris, is there anything we want to share out for our virtual friends? Okay. Well, Dr. Meisch and I are happy to stay, and we'll visit, and we'd love to meet you. Enjoy these resources, and anyway, have a great session. We'll see you today, and we'll see you tomorrow.